Dee Rees, you directed HBO's Bessie, which is about the life and career of legendary blues singer Bessie Smith. The project had been in various stages of development for several years. So how did the project finally come to you?
So basically, I came on 2 years ago to like rewrite the whole thing. So it had been around for 20 something years, had gone through like a number of studios, producers, and writers. And so I came in and it's like, HBO called me in and Flavor Unit called me in to just kind of like take a swag at it. So I came in and just like had a different take on it and just like redid it. And I really wanted to focus on, Bessie's like worldview and like get behind her eyes. Like I didn't want this to be just like history lesson. I wanted it to be like a personal take and like I was more interested in like the why the way she was, versus like the how and the when of it. And so it was just like that kind of trying to get to her core that kind of drove my kind of rewriting of the script 2 years ago. And then, we shot like last year. So that, kind of like went really quickly from there.
Bessie's life was so eventful, how much research and preparation was there involved in learning about her life and figuring out, what to include, how to tell her story?
So like a ton, because like and then like a lot of stuff like I'm like creating moments that maybe didn't exist. So for me it's like kind of like finding like key relationships. And so I wanted to create this Ma Rainey character because, to me like Bessie was a woman who probably kept her own counsel and didn't listen to a lot of people. So I needed a woman that she would listen to. And so, from the research, like Angela Davis's book, Blues Legacies and Black Feminism, I knew that Ma Rainey was a mentor to Bessie, and this was probably a formative relationship. And so there's about creating moments between these women that would show that and show how, Ma shaped Bessie, but then Bessie also then became her own kind of performer and kind of crossed over into spaces like Ma didn't. And then there's a book, Bessie Smith and the Emergent Urban South. So just like books by women who basically kind of contextualize her against the times were the ones I gravitated to. And also like Bessie's own song lyrics. I looked at her lyrics and specifically I was looking at the songs that she wrote versus the songs that other people wrote for her. So that I could try to understand like what was she thinking about, what was on her mind, like what was she seeing. And like, as an artist, she's writing about the things she's feeling or experiencing. And so I try to use that as a way into things that might have happened to her, or the way she might have felt about certain things. And, this idea of like a motherless child kept coming up for me. And so I thought, okay, so this is a woman who's like lost her mother at a young age and had to like fend for herself. And so then what does that look like? How does that play out then in romantic relationships? And so I was creating like moments for this woman who like maybe doesn't, know how to receive love completely or like is afraid to love completely. And so I just relied like on her songbooks and like went to the library and like was looking up like a lot of like books written by women about like the history of the time and to kind of get behind who she was. And there's anecdotes about her, like for example, like at the Van Vechten party that she, dissed this opera singer, and then like, goes on to sing Workhouse Blues, which is like super political and interesting. And so I wanted to get behind that, because the account of that party might be, oh, Bessie assaulted Mrs. Van Vechten and she was rude. But, I had to take into consideration, okay, like who's telling that story, and from whose perspective it like was she rude? And so I try to like recreate that moment in a way that, this is how it might have happened. This is what might have been said to her, and here's, Carl Van Vechten, who's writing a book called Nigger Heaven, and like might have told Bessie about that, and so I just really try to like get beneath the anecdote and like really get into, just give her some dimension.
Given how much happened in her life, was it difficult to encapsulate her story in a 2 hour film? Was there a lot of, did you have to lose a lot of great material that maybe you wanted to, tell that, included her story, but you couldn't quite accommodate?
Yeah, it was a lot of cuts, but like a lot of the cuts we made like in the drafts of the scripts on the 2 years of writing it, like in one version I had her, going like running off with the circus and so I, like there was like, different parts of the story that you could tell. And so settled on this because it was like, at the point where she's, she's a self-sufficient kind of woman, but she still has maybe this like kernel of guilt for home, like Viola, her older sister, still maybe has this hook in her. And so we chose this chunk because you get to meet her at this turning point where she's realizing like where she is and where she wants to be are two different things. So she hooks up with Ma, and then that then propels us through this whole kind of like arc of her kind of going crazy and then coming back down. So yeah, I mean, like it's a lot to tell. Like you could totally have like a 10 hour, you could have like a 5 season, multi-part story like on her life if you really want to drill down. And a lot of the cuts we had to make, came like in the script phase, and then in the editing, like we cut some stuff down. But at the end of it, and try to stay true to the feeling of who she was, like her like emotional experience. And so then that was the thing I wanted to blow out. Like, well, let's blow out her like emotional experience, over time.
Smith's music is, obviously, very important to the story, and a lot of her songs are featured in the film, sung by Queen Latifah. When incorporating her music into this story, how did you decide, how to feature the songs, which songs to feature? Was that a new experience, working with music in that way in telling the story?
Well, it's funny because in writing the script, I started with the songs because I wanted to kind of get in her head. And so I chose songs that were not, it wasn't about them being great performance numbers, but it's about songs that really let you into like who she was. So, for example, I wanted to start with Young Women's Blues because that's, she made it's like this manifesto of self. Like, this is who I am, this is who I'm not. And she goes on and contradicts herself and then, like, affirms herself in some of those ways. And, like, I got what it takes. Like, I wanted all the songs to be kind of inside you. It's kind of like, not just like stopping the action of the story to deliver the song. I really wanted the songs to be a part of the narrative and to come like organically, like we catch her in rehearsal. She's got this kind of rough thing. It's not quite there yet. Like, she's like at the big tent show. And I chose like Preaching the Blues because this feels like evangelical. It feels like spiritual. She's run off the planet, has this kind of feel that kind of plays the song fits that environment. And like Downhearted Blues, because that's actually what she first recorded with Columbia in the studio. So I always try to like have the songs like working in context. So it wasn't like, a typical musical that the story stops, they get out this number from beginning to end, and then, the story picks back up. I want it to kind of flow. And like Weeping Women's Blues, I wanted to use that song because it gives me a good opportunity for like this duet with Bessie and Ma. That may never happen, but it's just like, this idea of these two like women together, and it gives me a way to like show this parting of the ways. And yeah, so with all the songs I wanted, and like Long Old Road especially was thematically important because Long Old Road then becomes the spine. Like, there's this motif of travel, there's the trains, there's this constant idea of going elsewhere. And like, even like the very last shot, there's this road stretching in front of them. So I wanted to use like Long Old Road as like this like thematic idea, this like, when something's going on in her life, there's always this kind of possibility of like moving forward. She has like, a lot of like disappointments, but she's able to kind of keep going. And so I use that song really as like, it was like one of the first songs like I wanted to use in the script because it really is dark, it's like a little bit melancholic, but it's, honest, and it's like vulnerable. And so, yeah.
This is your first film since breaking out, a few years ago with Pariah in 2011. That made a pretty big impact. And in many ways, Bessie is a very different film. It's a period story, and it has kind of a broader scope. Was it a very different experience directing this as opposed to that film Pariah?
Well, to me, I mean, for me, I always go like on the relationships and like the performances. So like from that standpoint, the work is the same, right? So like the bigger budget, it buys you more time, it buys you fancier equipment, but it doesn't buy you those performances. So I feel like my work as a director in terms of blocking the scene and figuring out the relationships and getting the actors bouncing off each other, like that stuff is like all the same. And in a weird way, this is easier because we have more resources. So, there's a whole team who's like worrying about, the production design and not just like one person, and so it's just like more support. And so you're able to like have a larger scope, as you're saying, like a bigger perspective. But the thing that's going to move people are those moments, when people are looking at each other, it's like the stuff, it's like the subtext, the stuff between the lines. And so my work on that front was the same, and really just about these are the 5 key relationships, and then how do they interfere with each other, how do they uphold each other, and how do they ultimately kind of move Bessie into, this kind of young, woman who looks like she made her own costume in the beginning to this woman in the end who feels very at harmony with the world and her environment. We watch her from like vaudeville to very gilded, and like the scale is grand, but it's kind of hollow inside, to in the end, like more pastels, and she's back with nature. She's in harmony, like with the world. And so we just kind of used, for me as a director, I'm still thinking like in those kind of like thematic terms, in terms of motifs, and like I'm thinking in terms of ideas, in the same way as with Pariah.
You mentioned, working with actors and getting those kinds of performances out of them and focusing on relationships, and you're developing a pretty good track record, with actors. Adepero Oduye got a lot of awards attention for Pariah, and now Queen Latifah is getting attention for Bessie. Just got a Critics' Choice nomination. What is it like working with Queen Latifah on some of those more intense, intimate scenes in the film?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, it was about, creating an environment where she could kind of go there, and like getting things quiet, getting things concentrated. And she would be listening to Bessie in between takes. She like have certain songs she would kind of tap into. And as a director, in those moments where, you've talked about like, the actor's got it, it's about being able to like get out of the way and just capture it. Like even like with the camera, it's like run us over, like we'll move, the camera like move to you. And I didn't want her to be conscious of marks or hitting, I wanted the camera to really adapt to her and use like a lot of steady cam so that we're mobile, we're able to move around her. And she was like passionate about it because she's been wanting to do this for 20 some odd years. It's like she was ready to go there. I think she was able to kind of tap into a place of lived experience and also kind of get into the material and get into the music and kind of bring all that, to the screen. And as a director, it's about, seeing what's happening in front of you and being able to like adjust and just use other actors to kind of like, I feel like I'm like instigating half the time. I'm setting one actor up against another and telling one something but not telling the other, and just through the blocking, really kind of creating dramatic tension. So, I might put two people who hate each other next to each other and two people who love each other like far apart. So then when you're shooting, there's this reaching that has to happen. Or, when Candy's sitting next to Michael K at the table, like there's this antagonism, it's this like low level antagonism, but then creates this weird camaraderie. And then Bessie and Lucille sitting at the other end and this thing they can't say to each other. So I just like to play with blocking and, all that helps activate the performances. And I think so much more can be said with a look, than a line. So it's about, using all that and playing with it. And once you got it a certain way, just giving yourself options. So, yeah.
You don't shy away from, a lot of the darker aspects of Bessie's life. She's sometimes reckless and aggressive, and she gets very cocky about her talent and her career. Do you think, those qualities, were in some ways beneficial to her, moving her career forward, or did they maybe hold her back at all, do you think?
I think they're the only reasons why we're still talking about her today. I love the idea of her as this like bully saint. She's a bully, she's a savior, she's, this emancipator, but, she's locked up in her own mind in some ways. I liked all those kind of contradictions and showing all of them because it shows how, what people think from the stage. They think, oh, she's brassy, she's bold. But then, behind the scenes, she's actually very vulnerable. She's lonely. She's like scared. She's like afraid to love. And so I really like kind of having those kind of contradictions, and showing that through her character. And because I think it helps us be able to relate to her more. She's not all one thing, and she's not, just a hero. She's also, non-committal sometimes. She's like, hard to understand. She's hard to know. And so she's like, consuming, and in the end, Ma teaches her how to give and not just take. And so I think that, it just gives her character arc somewhere to go and just helps us just humanize her, basically.
Early on in your career, you actually worked as an intern for director Spike Lee. I was wondering, how did that experience sort of influence your work? Did any of the lessons you took from him sort of, come into your making Pariah and now making Bessie?
Yeah, I say the thing I learned from him is that it has to be on the screen, right? So on a screen, you can't stand by the theater screen and with a pointer and explain what you're trying to do. Like it has to be there. And so I think I learned that. And also just in terms of just being visually like striking and engaging and like, telling the story, like with the composition, like with the picture and, where you put the camera, like says something, and just being very kind of mindful of where the camera's going and why and how it's moving and why. And just being, in terms of just like set management, just kind of like having an idea about something. And, on the one hand, you have to like stick with it and like really kind of like know what you want. But then also you have to be open to if something isn't working the way you want. You have to be able to adapt. So just the idea of like sticking to your guns, but then, being able to like call an audible were things that, I think work for me as a director, but if you don't have a vision going into it, if you don't have a game plan, then you're not able to kind of adapt and you're not able to like change in that same way. So.
In 2011, the year Pariah made such a big impact, from the Sundance Film Festival all the way to some year-end awards. You won a Gotham Award, an Independent Spirit Award for that. After all of that, did you notice that there was a big change in your life and your career? Did a lot of opportunities and offers open up to you at that point?
I feel like I got pursued a lot for like writing, directing jobs. There's all these things that like I had to write and then direct. And so like I wrote a ton between like then and now. And, the writing really kept me in it and kept me current, even though I wasn't able, like, the stuff I wrote didn't go, it just kept my voice out there and people like, like they like all these scripts are floating around and like people like the voice. And then for me, like when I'm writing, I'm always writing with a director's eye. And so I think that actually, like when you read the script, you can see it. And so I think that really kept me, post Pariah. Those were opportunities that kind of opened up and kind of kept me, on the radar and kind of kept me working basically. So, I was lucky that, it did that.
Looking at Bessie Smith's life as a whole and the film as a whole, is there a most important takeaway that you'd like viewers to come away with about, Bessie, about her music, or, this period in history?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, I think it's about, for me, the story of Bessie is like about an artist, and it's about how to create work, on your own terms, and work that like how to not lose the intention of your work, even like when the mode changes, like going from independent to like studio deal, going from live to recorded. So like how to let your work be a living thing that connects with people. And I think that's what Bessie did, is like, it wasn't just her song, it was everybody's song. When she's singing it, the crowd is singing with her. And so just this idea, just as an artist, to me, it's remarkable to watch, like, okay, this is how you can do your work in a way that, no matter the form, no matter how the world, no matter how the context changes, the intention continues to kind of carry through. So I think that's the thing.
So, as an artist yourself, got to talk to Queen Latifah a couple of, a week or so ago, and she talked about being able to relate to this woman as an artist. Could you, sort of relate to her personally, in terms of her experience of being an artist?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially in the moments where she's like, she's got the talent, but she's not breaking through in the way she wants to. She gets rejected by Black Swan. The place where you think she's absolutely going to get signed, and that she doesn't, and that kind of build, that kind of self-reliance, that kind of resilience, I totally related to. And this Tennessee woman, this Tennessee Black queer woman. I'm like, I'm a Tennessee Black queer woman, so it kind of like, just on a personal level, I was like, oh yeah, this is me. I relate to this story. I can, I can imagine like what that must be like, and just the idea that what things appear to be aren't necessarily like what they are, and how Bessie isn't totally understood by kind of like the mainstream art establishment. She isn't totally understood by the Harlem Renaissance. So she's like, not fitting neatly in either space, was something I identify with. And I really just admire that she was able to like maintain who she was, throughout it. And even though she struggled, even though she made mistakes, she was always choosing, she was an autodidact. She was in control. She didn't let circumstances kind of choose for her. So the fact that even when they're bad choices, they were her choices. Like she was always choosing. So yeah.
I want to congratulate you again on the film and on the Critics' Choice nominations, also up for TV movie. And best of luck at the Emmys in a couple of months. I think it'll do well.
All right. Thanks. We'll see. I just hope people see it and like it. So we'll see. Thanks. Thanks.